What's going on, guys? We are back in the city of Cohiba. Last episode, we completely transformed our downtown by taking a lifeless square to zoned residential and turning it into a pretty realistic looking skyline, at least from afar. We laid the foundation, but there are a lot of gaps and missing details that I want to add that I think will really improve the look of the downtown. Before jumping into that, there are a few other projects I want to tackle first though. I've been holding off on this for a while due to the size of our city, but I think it's finally time to start upgrading our transportation infrastructure. I decided to place a taxi depot on this empty plot of land in the Cohiba Heights neighborhood north of downtown. Before building this, Sims could only get from point A to point B by walking or driving their own personal vehicle, which I'm sure caused a headache for the Sims who had a long way to go and really no way to get there. After placing the depot and adding a little detail to the surrounding homes, I upgraded the depot with a dispatch center. The dispatch center allows for Sims to call for a ride, instead of having to wait at a designated taxi stand. You can see the immediate effects of the dispatch center. As soon as I placed it, there was a mass exodus of taxi cabs, leaving the depot and going to pick up some paying passengers. The addition of our new taxi depot with the dispatch center is a big upgrade. But I don't want taxis to be the only form of public transit. Looking at our transportation overview, you can see all of the taxi cabs scattered throughout the region, filling up our roadways. On one hand, it's great that we're already getting this much use out of our taxi depot, but on the other hand, I think it shows that there's demand for other forms of public transit. With this in mind, I think it's the right time to add bus service to the region. The first step to building a bus network is to place a bus depot, which acts as a storage and maintenance facility for buses not in use. I found this area of undeveloped land, and I thought it was a good spot as any. It's pretty close to downtown, but it isn't exactly in a high land value area. I actually think this area is a good spot for some light industry, so I decided to build a small industrial complex next door, since there's some demand for it. I'm just doing some minimal detailing here, adjusting surfaces, adding some trees and bushes, and a few decals to make the asphalt look worn. With our bus depot built and ready for use, it was time to start thinking about A, where our main bus station was going to sit, and B, what type of bus routes we want to add. For the main bus station, I want it to be located in a nice central location. I zeroed in on the southern portion of our Cohiba Heights neighborhood due to its proximity to downtown, but all of the lots were either too small or already had buildings on it. Nothing that a little eminent domain can't solve though. That's better. With our empty lot, we can now place the main bus station for Cohiba. Since bus stations create a lot of traffic, I wanted to be smart about which direction the entrances and exits were facing. I decided to rotate it to face downwards, and I built a dedicated street for bus traffic. Next, I converted the adjacent roads to 2-lane, one-way roads, which I think should help with traffic flow. And just like that, we have a brand new bus station. Before adding routes, let's go in and polish it up a bit. pretty happy with how the central bus station turned out. I had some space left over, so I built a custom parking lot that would serve as a park and ride. Then I squeezed a small commercial shop into that leftover corner of empty space. With the depot and bus station built, let's talk about the type of routes I want to add. Since we're still a small city, I only want to add a few routes starting off, focusing on straightforward route designs that connect Sims into the most populated areas. I also want the bus station to serve as a sort of Greyhound station that brings Sims to and from the city. The first route I created is a connection from the main station down to the southern boundary of the Cohiba Bay region, which connects into the fictional city of Carrizo. Next, I did the same thing for the northern side of the region, connecting Cohiba Bay with the city of Southwell. With 2 intercity connections made, let's focus our attention now on adding a couple of local bus lines. The plan here is simple. 2 local bus lines, one going north to south, the other going east to west. I'm not a transportation expert by any means, but to me this seems like a simple and efficient way to connect the city and provide public transit for the greatest number of Sims without breaking the bank. And this is what I did. For the first bus line, I started at the top of our Cohiba Heights neighborhood and brought it all the way down to the industrial sector of downtown. Next, I connected East Cohiba with West Cohiba by creating mostly a straight line with stops added every 3 to 4 blocks. After spending what was probably too much time watching buses pick up passengers in cinematic mode, I realized that the entire region had lost power. I checked the electricity info view and saw that our electricity availability was pretty much at 0 and that our electricity trade was hovering at a slight deficit, but it didn't really tell me what the issue was. After zooming around the map for a few minutes, I realized that one of our substations was on fire. The fire was eventually extinguished and power returned to the region, but it got me thinking. If a fire at one substation can knock out power for the entire region, maybe it's time we start thinking about long-term solutions for power generation. As it stands now, most of our electricity is imported, with the only exception being that our garbage incinerator creates a small amount of energy that can be used for electricity. With money not really being an issue anymore, let's build a power plant that will power Cohiba Bay now and into the future. I started comparing the types of power plants and found that the gas power plant was likely the most appropriate option based on cost and power generation. With a price tag of $650,000 and costing 6 times more than the small coal power plant, the power generation increases from 20 megawatts to 250 megawatts. Our current power consumption is about 32 megawatts, so this power plant should be able to handle all of our needs now while also taking care of business for a good ways into the future. I started scouting out some areas and found that this side of the bay would be a pretty decent spot since we already have a few forms of pollution creating buildings. We got our landfill, a garbage incinerator, and some light industry in the area, so why not add a giant power plant to the mix? I went into Google Earth and found that there's actually a power plant in a pretty similar location in Tampa, and I think it'd be fun to take some inspiration from it. There's also a causeway that connects the Port of Tampa to the area nearby that I also think would be fun to add. The power plant itself is located right on the water, and has a canal that allows for resources to be transported by ship. It also looks like there are some other industrial uses mixed in, like mining, material storage, and recycling. There's a lot of inspiration to work with here, so let's create our own version of this. I'm starting by building a causeway across the bay. I decided to expand the future port area. Next, I dragged out road and started to flesh out the causeway itself. Let's get started on the power plant now. Just like the one in real life, we're building a gas power plant, perfectly situated on a peninsula with a canal running through it. But I don't want to build the plant and call it a day. I want to give this space plenty of other uses, packed with smaller details that give it a more realistic feel. I have a feeling this is going to take a while, so grab a snack and enjoy the time lapse. Well, that took a while, but I like how the power plant turned out, and I think there's a lot of fun details within the build. I mentioned I wanted the site to house a few other uses, and I definitely think we accomplished that. The main power plant only covers a small portion of the build, and I wanted everything else to sort of look like it belonged there, and had a part to play for the entire facility. Over here I added some more garbage management, not because we needed it, but because I thought it looked like it fit. Here we have a section dedicated entirely to storage with all sorts of warehouses, storage facilities, and random mounds of dirt and sand. I also added some water reservoirs, which I assume would be used to cool the power plant in real life. And on this section of the site, I sort of just added random industry. You can tell it's towards the end of the build because of how low effort it was, but I added some trees, added some decals, and I think it turned out pretty nicely actually. With this detour finally completed, and I say detour because this wasn't even part of the plan for this episode, it's time to move on to a big item on the to-do list, and that's to add cargo rail to the region. This will be a much needed boon to our economy, as it allows for large quantities of resources to be imported and exported from the Cohiba Bay region, meaning that consumers and companies have more access to the outside market, and when local companies produce more goods than can be used in the region, they can ship them off to outside connections and make more money. As it stands currently, goods can be imported and exported, but only through road connections, which means that goods are being traded at much lower volumes than what is possible with cargo rail connections. To bring rail transportation into the city, we'll need to start by placing a rail yard somewhere, which will serve as a storage and maintenance facility for trains, sort of like the bus depot we placed earlier. Rail yards are massive structures, not just because of the buildings, but because of all the train tracks that run through them. As I started surveying the area, I was having trouble finding a spot where the rail yard would even fit. When I created this map many months ago, I created sort of a fake rail yard here, thinking that this would be a good spot for one, but as I look at it now, I realize that this blocks so much future development and road connectivity under the highway, so I'm going to delete these rail tracks eventually, but for now, let's just keep scouting the areas. I eventually decided that the location of our current landfill is a prime spot for a rail yard, and there's actually a rail yard in Tampa in a similar location that I'm going to take some inspiration from. The location of the train tracks here makes it difficult though, as there would be very little space to make a connection into the rail yard. So we're going to be making a few changes. And it starts up here. Instead of having the rail make this turn downward before the river, I wanted to extend across the river before making its southward turn. This will allow for more space to turn once the rail gets closer to the rail yard. I'm also not a fan of this intersection, and I want to redo it so that the highway is an overpass with on and off ramps. Let's get into it. We have a bit more space to work with, so let's demolish this landfill. And if you're concerned that we won't have adequate garbage services after this, don't be. With our garbage incinerator and the recycling center we placed by our power plant, we should have ample coverage for the foreseeable future. As for the rail yard, I'm going to place it at a diagonal angle, and I'm going to set it up so that the rail line loops back around and connects up like a closed circuit. Now that we got our rail yard out of the way, we can place our first cargo terminal, where goods and resources can be exported and imported to be distributed throughout the region. For our first terminal, we're going to place it on the future port of Cohiba. In the future, this place will be pretty bustling. We're going to have a cargo harbor and lots of industry, so having a freight train terminal will be pretty convenient for all the industrial uses that are eventually going to take place here. My original plan was to place the cargo terminal right at the end of this loop here, but I underestimated how large this asset was, so we're going to call an audible. Instead, I placed it on this corner and ran tracks up into the loop. Not sure if track layouts exist like this in real life, but it made sense to me, and we're just going to have to hope it functions well. With the cargo terminal ready, let's create our first cargo train line. These function like bus lines, where you select the starting point, choose the stops, then select the end point. In our case, we're going to start at the cargo terminal, choose an outside connection as the destination, and then end it at our cargo terminal. This should allow for the trains to transport goods to and from the outside connection. Once I saw that the first line was working as intended, I went ahead and added 2 more, connecting Cohiba Bay with regions to the north and the south. It's pretty satisfying to see it in action, with trains loading and unloading, and trucks dropping by and doing the same. Now that we know that the cargo terminal is working as intended, let's spend just a small amount of time polishing it up. I know I already said this, but it really is satisfying to watch your transportation lines in action. With taxis, buses, and cargo train transportation out of the way, I wanted to go downtown again and revisit some of the work we did last episode. The skyline we built looks good from afar, but it's far from good when you start zooming in and looking at all the open spaces. Before ending the episode, I wanted to start chipping away at adding the little details downtown to make the area feel just a little bit more realistic and make it come to life. I know that laying out parking lots and fine-tuning landscaping isn't the most thrilling part of city building, but it's a necessary evil. These small details don't add much on their own, but together they help shape the city into something that feels lived in, something that looks less like a game and more like an actual place. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. I know it took a while to get this one out, but I feel like we accomplished a lot and added some of the necessary building blocks to keep growing this region. As far as the next video goes, what should we work on next? Should we stay in Cohiba? Should we return to St. Alexander across the bay? Let me know what you'd like to see in the comments. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching this episode, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.